discussion goes back a long time. When I was working for Governor Freudenthal back in 2003, there was discussion, but he didn't really want to do it. He kind of was like, we need to get stuff done that's in front of us. But I think it's probably time at least for a discussion to see how the state and the tribes could work more closely together. And I know there are relationships to the DFS, YDOT, and Game and Fish, and some of those. But this is something that would outlast our administration here, and maybe worthwhile topic that we need to move forward on. So at this time, you could introduce yourself for the record, and we'll start from there.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Savannah Collins, legislative attorney with LSO. I'm presenting the white paper in your packet on the Washington State Centennial Accord between the Washington State Governor and the 26 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington. The white paper itself provides an overview of the 1989 Centennial Accord, the renewal of the Accord in 1999 through the Millennium Agreement, and more recent actions under the Accord. And this memorandum was drafted at the chairman's request. So the Centennial Accord is an accord in the state of Washington that provides a policy framework for issues of mutual concern between the state of Washington and the 26 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington. The accord set out the expectation and agreement to have better government-to-government relations between the states and the tribes. The stated ultimate purpose was to improve the services delivered to the people by the parties. Under this accord, the state agencies and tribes are required to develop a procedure to implement this relationship, and a key part of developing the relationship is the required educational effort on the part of all parties and the public to make sure the government-to-government relationship is better understood. The accord also recognizes the sovereignty of both the state and tribal governments and did not give up any rights of the parties, including treaty rights, immunities, including sovereign immunities or jurisdiction. So overall, the structure is a bit triangular in hierarchy. The signatories of the accord are the governor and the tribes. Although the governor is the signatory, the governor's chief of staff is the person responsible for implementing the terms of the accord and reporting back to the governor. In coordination with the Chief of Staff's office, the Washington Governor's Office of Indian Affairs provides agency directors with information to educate them about the requirements under that government-to-government relationship. And they also aid in the educational effort, which I mentioned earlier, which is a duty now under Washington statute. The state agency directors are then accountable to the governor's chief of staff. The state agency directors must have a documented plan of accountability on how they plan to implement their part of the accord. The agencies can create more complex and specific agreements with the tribes beyond the plan, but the documented plan of accountability is the bare minimum. As part of these plans, agencies and tribes must identify individuals who are directly responsible for issues of mutual concern to better implement this accord. The tribes are required to direct their staff to work with the state agencies and let each state agency they are working with know the current tribal organization, decision-making processes, and relevant tribal personnel. Tribes, like the state agencies, are also required to make a documented plan of accountability. I mentioned the word accountability quite a few times. That's the major tenet of the Centennial Accord across the board. And one of the ways that accountability goal is achieved is the requirement for an annual review and evaluation of the implementation of the government-to-government relationship between the states and the tribes. So every year the parties meet and they review the actions from the previous year between the different departments, and they have a bit of a feedback session amongst the parties. And then they produce a specific management report which has an evaluation, an evaluation summary, as well as joint strategies and specific agreements to outline tasks, overcome obstacles, and achieve specific goals. Roughly 10 years after the accord was originally signed, the parties came back together to further clarify the process and protocols for implementing the accord, and this was known as the Millennium Agreement. The Millennium Agreement laid out much more specific guidelines known as the implementation guidelines, and those are the general framework used for the past roughly 20 years. Section 1 of the implementation guidelines provides definitions, so the parties are using the same language. The terms covered range from tribal sovereignty to government and trust responsibility. Section 2 provides the critical elements of the consultation process, which is critical to the government relationship and is the foundation of the Centennial Accord. The consultation process must identify the participants in the process, provide a clear description of the nature of the issue and/or the conflict, allow ample time to review documents and respond to requests for consultation, establish and adhere to a schedule for consultation, recognize the tribes are traditionally, culturally, and administratively different from each other, and use work groups and/or task forces to develop recommendations and report on the outcomes of the consultation. Section 3 requires every state agency to have a dispute resolution process in place and to publish contact information for people in the agency who can aid in the dispute resolution process. Section 4 mandates that state agencies must establish a procedure on how they will implement the government relationship plan, referred to as the Centennial Accord plans. And these are created in conjunction with the tribes that they are working with. It is not a one-sided plan, it is the parties coming together to work together. And every year there are Centennial Accord agency highlights for each of the annual review meetings that I spoke about, and those are available on the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs website from 2007 through 2025. And they are pretty extensive documents that cover each agency's relationship and actions with the tribes over the previous years. Finally, Section 5 lays out the responsibilities and roles of a non-exhaustive list of different state agencies, tribes, and intertribal organizations. Since the Millennium Agreement, there have been additional signatories from 3 new federally recognized tribes, as well as 3 out-of-state tribes with treaty rights in Washington state. In 2012, the Washington State Legislature passed legislation codifying the accord, and I have those statutes for reference if you have any questions. The legislation provides those definitions, establishes duties of state agencies, requires a tribal liaison for each state agency, requires tribal training for every state agency director, and mandates a list of contact information for relevant parties. And then this past October, on October 22nd, Washington State Governor Bob Ferguson issued Executive Order 2510, a new foundation for Washington State's governmental relations with sovereign tribal nations. The executive order, created pursuant to the Centennial Accord and Millennium Agreement, directs cabinet agencies to improve the state's relations with tribal nations through proactive engagement, tribal consultation, recognition and incorporation of indigenous knowledge, supporting Washington State Native artists, transparency, and accountability. The executive team members of the agencies are also now required to receive the training that the executive directors, have been required to receive under the agreement. Additionally, the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs is required to provide training to any state employee rather than just the state agency directors. State agencies under the executive order must also update their consultation guidelines, and the executive order has various reporting requirements as well. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I'd like to ask Chairman Grossback and Chairman Large if they could come up and what we're talking about here is the development or the start of a state tribal policy on how the state works with the tribal governments with in reference to sovereignty and self-governance, jurisdiction, all kinds of issues. And but it's just something that we put on our agenda today, and Ms. Collins did a great, wonderful job of kind of giving an overview of the Washington State Accord. Of course, the Washington State Accord covers, 26 tribes, and we just have the 2 tribes here. I know there was kind of preliminary discussion in terms of maybe starting with education or transportation or whatever. But I think the more controversial issues, water, jurisdiction, some of those things may take a while to tackle. So again, I welcome Chairman Gross back, and I'll give you the start here, since we listened to and heard from Chairman Large this morning.
Chairman Posey, if I may, and respected representatives. I did my homework on this, and it's a good model to follow because, as we all know, within the state and the tribes, there is silos within the tribal government process. And this is a good way to overcome and have that good, true government to government relationship that needs to happen so it could benefit every member on the reservation, enroll member. So I do like the model, and I think a start would be open up our own Indian education office right here within the state. That'd be a good start because that's where it needs to start for our youth. We don't have one, and a lot of times the problems that we have within the public school system is on deaf ears, to say, and to say the least about it. And like you said, we have the water issues, the land issues, oil and gas, you name it, we need it. So that way this government relationship that the tribes do have with the state of Wyoming could become better. Because I know we're both lacking on both sides because a lot of times we don't make the time for it, or everybody gets too busy. And there is a lot of issues that are at play here all the way across the board through our governments, both governments. That's all.
Chairman Large?
I will concur with, Mr. Chairman, I will concur with Councilman Grosbeck. We do need at the state level on the education for Native Americans, somebody there. I know that, I will concur with the same thing because we're the only two tribes here in Wind River. And to work with the state of Wyoming, keep that relationship positive. But like he said, I agree. We have the land issue, we have the water issue. And those are still issues that's been at the helm for a long time. Before my time coming on to get on council, and I respect you, Chairman, you've been on the council before, and like I seen another gentleman here, past Chairman Wagon. We know those issues that face the tribes here. But I would advocate that it'd be good. I mean, especially with the education, because we're dealing with UW, and hopefully that will become some. So even though we have to go across the border, but within our own state. The other thing is, one thing I know it's going to be talked about tomorrow, so I don't really want to go there on the solid waste. That'll be addressed tomorrow. The other thing is, I know it's Shoshone tribe, exercising to hunt off the reservation boundary with a treaty on unoccupied land. I know of the Crow case with the Crow gentleman that was arrested, and there's all that article there, but where we could hunt on unoccupied. So those are addresses we're looking at, in the near future. But other than that, that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Large. And Chairman Grossback, is there any discussion or questions from the committee thus far? Like I said, I mentioned earlier, there are relationships between various state agencies as well as tribal agencies. Sometimes those work okay. Sometimes, there's some concerns there. And I just know that from sitting on your guys' side for many years. But I think if there is a approach to better those relationships and to develop some kind of flow, I guess, of how it make it a lot easier. Because I really believe that sometimes the state don't understand tribal politics or maybe even tribal communities at times, you know, and some of the issues. We all have the um, basic human uh, issues, but sometimes they affect our tribal people more. And sometimes that's lost at state level, obvious lost at the national level. And you know, I think this may be a start to better those relationships with some type of process in place that makes those relationships more effective. So, Chairman Case.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm a little bit more skeptical. I trying to understand why the legislature would do this. And I think there are good reasons why they should do this, but the present makeup of the legislature, and they're very skeptical of giving up state powers. And so it feels one-sided in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think if you look at the state of Wyoming relationship with tribal governments, the state voluntarily added the school districts to the reservation,
Mm-hmm.
voluntarily established liaisons with these departments, voluntarily supported tribal DFS efforts and direct funding. Those were all things that weren't mandated by any kind of overall effort. And I think we got maybe a better outcome because I think is particularly in the House of Representatives, I think this would not, would be very skeptically considered. And I know I appreciate the good chairman. I appreciate people of the Wind River, what you'd like to achieve out of it. But I do not see the legislature saying that this is a good idea. It's got to be more in it for the state.
Thank you, Chairman Case, for those comments.
Chairman,
Chairman Grossbeck.
you know, I see the state want to be reluctant to do that. But at the same time, you know, they say voluntarily made up the districts. That had to happen for us guys to have our schools out here. What's wrong with us wanting to have schools out here, you know? No, I'm just saying, you know? And once we did that, then it opened up the door for the state to come in. Now we have tax issues and everything else out here. You know, that's what that led to for us wanting to have education for our children.
But Mr. Chairman, a lot of reservations don't have states that provide schools. They're BIA schools on the reservations. I'm glad we have this relationship. I'm glad the state funds education on the reservation. But not all states do it that way. And in fact, I think we're kind of the outlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad we are.
I think I wanted to expand a little bit on how the relationship is unique to the state of Wyoming and the Wind River tribes because we're also citizens of Wyoming. We carry our tribal citizenship, our county citizenship, as well as citizens of the great state of Wyoming. And makes us unique is through our treaties and self-governance. And I know the schools were placed here because way back in the early 1900s, there was acreage set aside for school districts, you know. I don't think the state voluntarily did that. I think what it was set aside, obviously, as Chairman Case said about St. Stephen's, that came from the mission. That was and it eventually turned into Bureau of Indian Education School, which it still is. But it's the public school aspect is something I feel it's not voluntary because um and it's not something that we're owed, but it's the responsibility of the state to provide that education to students that live on a reservation. That's why we have the three Wyoming Indian, Fort Washakie, and Arapaho that are public schools.
It's constitutional.
That's constitutional. Yes, you're right. But I think I think there are some things, but if you look at what the state did voluntarily uh, compared to what the tribes done involuntarily, as I mentioned always, is you got to understand history before you approach what we want in the future. And I think that's just something that's really not understood at levels um, on the state side. For those that live in our tribal communities, those that um, get services through the state of Wyoming through public funding, they're just a aspect that those could be better. And that's what I brought this interim topic up just to have discussion on because sometimes, this as you know, the last JAC meeting, there was the pass-through federal funds that caused the uproar. And I think if there was just a basic understanding of how that system works and how those funds are utilized, it probably would have been a better outcome. Although it did work out, but it probably didn't have to happen if there was a little bit more understanding of our tribal communities. And that's it's not to start an argument or disagreement. It's just to start discussion of what could possibly work better. I know the tribes' relationship with YDOT has been pretty good over the years. I know with DFS, it's been good. Education, I know those issues continually come up at times. I know the Indian desk has been discussed even when I was on the council in the 90s, and obviously there's jurisdiction where we have the Wyoming Highway Patrol, we have Bureau of Indian Affairs, we have the Fremont County Sheriffs, we have the Federal Bureau of Investigation that addresses all major crimes on reservation. So sometimes the system lacks clarity, and that not only affects the governments, it affects the citizens. It affects if there's a major crime on a reservation. As you gentlemen know, the chairman know, it's you're lost. The families don't know what's going on. They don't know what law enforcement to go to. And sometimes that gets lost, and it seems like there's no justice in the system. And that's just me speaking as a tribal member and as a community member, and realizing that some things could get better in terms of just basic dialogue and a framework as Ms. Collins here presented. I understand that the legislature would have to buy into it. But I know all the nuts and bolts of the agreement or the accord goes through the executive branch, basically. They're responsible for that. So it's just open for discussion of what and we'll listen to the Wyoming departments here in a bit of what their thoughts are and how we could better. But I just wanted to get your, as a chairman, what you guys felt was important. Sounds like education is on top of both of your list.
Mhm.
So maybe that's part of the policy that if we decide to move forward, that would be the one that we would try to tackle. So I'll get off my soapbox.
And Mr.
I apologize. I get passionate about some of this stuff.
And Mr. Chairman,
Because I realize it affects not just me, our basic citizens of the reservation.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I need to step down a couple of steps off my soapbox and be very clear because I did a search and that statement that most reservations have BIA funded schools is not true. This is AI, so take it for what you want, you guys. But it says that 90% of Native students in America attend state schools and 10% of federal schools, BIA schools. So when I said that, I misspoke, and I want to be clear about that. I don't want to leave it misinformation or take us down a wrong path.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My soapbox is short.
Is there any comments or questions from the committee at this time, or any more comments from the chairman? Okay, we are going to start inviting the state programs up, and we have the Department of Family Services, Department of Transportation, Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and the Department of Ed. You guys could all sit on the same panel. You may have to pull up a couple extra chairs. All right, Chairman Case said this morning, a longer table. Again, you probably get that crux of what we're discussing here. And I guess what we wanted to hear was kind of the current status of relationships between your respective agency and with the tribes, and maybe how that could be enhanced, or whatever you feel is important to discuss this afternoon. We'll start with DFS. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. We also have a senior administrator who's called in on behalf of our Economic Security Division if there are questions about that. I might start off by saying, in answer to your question, I have had such a privilege of working with the tribal communities and the tribal leadership for many years, and I have benefited from the grace that they've extended to me for learning curves that I've had to suffer. I think from an agency perspective, we're doing a lot of really great things in terms of incorporating tribal awareness to our whole staff through our initial core training of new caseworkers. We're also working to improve our Indian Child Welfare Act policy and training to accompany the statutes that have changed recently. So we're doing a lot of really great things in terms of understanding that cultural awareness and understanding that it goes beyond Fremont County throughout the state. The appeal from my perspective for the Washington Accord, or elements of it, I think there are so many things that are working really well in Wyoming. I don't think that we need to become Washington, but some of the things that I think are that would benefit are just, you know, if I left, it would be nice to incorporate some of the things that I've learned into a roadmap for the people who follow behind me. And similarly, we have, you know, we benefited from the select committee for many years, or I have. And so if you all are not in these seats, what would the roadmap be to follow and to understand where we've been and how we make decisions and how we work together? So I know that it would be beneficial in a lot of ways. But I also know that I also know that we're building on a lot of great work that's happening between these agencies and within ours.
Department of Transportation, Mr. Beers.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Cody Beers. and I've been the tribal liaison with YDOT for about a dozen years. But I've had a lifetime of enjoyment clear back to when my family homesteaded on the reservation back in the 1960s, and starting out their ranch with 40 acres, and then working with the tribes through time to gain some fee title land and also tribal leased land, which grew my family's ranch to, at one time, the largest non-Indian ranch on the Wind River Reservation. So my grandparents were very important in my life. Their teachings still are. I try to work with people and develop long-lasting relationships, which it's been a privilege on Wind River to develop many lifelong friendships also. One of the things that YDOT does is that we approach our relationship with the tribes as a team effort, and we try to act with humility, openness, patience, and above all, an asset-based mentality. So if we're talking about a road or a bridge or a pedestrian pathway or even a tribal road, we use the principles of safety to drive our decision making. A good example is our current effort to rebuild a section of Wyoming Highway 132 between Ethity and Kinnear, which locally is known as Hell's Hill. It's been an area that has had a higher incidence of crashes and other issues, fatalities. And so we have worked in depth with the Tribal Transportation Office led by Winslow Friday, and before him, Big John Smith, and the two business councils on the Wind River Reservation, which make up the Intertribal Council. And that's part of understanding how the tribes work, and always recognizing sovereignty and showing trust for that relationship. That has helped us to gain many victories for both the state of Wyoming and the Wind River Reservation with being partners. We've worked on issues such as jurisdiction on and off the reservation. Our local captain, Eric Jorgensen's in the house, and he'll be visiting with you in a while. But we spend a lot of time getting to know the people. In many instances, getting to know their children, who are doing great things in our county and throughout our state, and then having a respect for what's going on. And that has really opened doors for me as the tribal liaison, being able to do the things we've done, and also to help tribal transportation see victories like Yellow Calf Road and the pedestrian pathway be built there. A pedestrian pathway built between Fort Washakie and Heinz Store. A pedestrian pathway being built from Ethity to Wyoming Indian Elementary School, because that is a priority. Pedestrian deaths have been an issue, and so we're doing our part along with the tribes to look at safety issues, and I'm proud of that relationship. I spend a lot of my time working on it, and I guess I'd just like to share some best practices that I employ in my work. And at the end of the day, we must all respect tribal sovereignty. Sovereignty matters. I always seek formal approval of whatever we're needing to get done with the tribal councils. This respects the tribe's self-determination, that they can make decisions, and they do make decisions on behalf of their people. We also must understand the historical context and the unique legal relationship between the U.S. government and the tribes. We can't assume anything, And if you don't know, ask. I'm the master of asking questions and trying to learn what's happening. It's important for the state of Wyoming and the tribes to both tell each other the truth, to practice active listening. I've found that that's probably the most valuable tool that I've used in working on Wind River country, is the ability to listen. We all must exercise patience in that relationship. We've got to enjoy the ride too, and I think we have, and we've experienced those small victories in saving lives. For instance, in the last 3 years, we've done what no other part of the state's been able to do, and that's 3 years in a row, our seatbelt use in Fremont County and the Wind River Reservation has exceeded 90%. That's a small victory. Do we still have horrific crashes? We do, but we're buckling our seatbelts and making a difference for the most part. And then we've got to smile a little bit. The relationship has got to be based on a sense of humor, so to speak. I've had many jokes told about Cody beers, and I enjoy that. And I have to be careful what I say to guys like Winslow Friday because they use it against me. But I enjoy that, and humor has got to be a part of everything we do. So, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions on anything you might want to ask.
Any questions at this time? Chairman Case?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate what everybody's doing so far, and I know it's going to be great as we go down the road. I just know it. If you can, in your discussion, think about what a formalization of this process might look like, or if we need a formalization or not. The Washington Accord is pretty extensive, actually. So I'm wondering if you guys have kind of done it right without having an accord to direct you. And I do understand Mrs. Neely's concerns about transition, but your agencies, I know there'll be new people here, they'll do good jobs. There'll be new people in your seats and they'll do good jobs, is the way I look at that. But think about the Washington Accord.
Would you like me to answer that? Mr. Chairman, I find that the way we do things at WYDOT, we're a big agency, but we work one-on-one with the playmakers, so to speak, the people who open the gates and close the gates, and it works very well for us. That relationship has been key, and keeping it informal has been key for WYDOT. I can load up, I'll use his name again, Winslow Friday, in a vehicle, and we can go to Cheyenne and we can sit down with all the bosses down there, and he can share concerns and get answers to questions that he has had. A good example this last year is the work that was done by the Wind River Intertribal Council to get the exemption in place so that tribal government vehicles now are no longer forced to get and pay for registering each vehicle. And of course that came out of the legislature, but that was a work done by a lot of people in an informal way to kick off what was a successful piece of legislation.
And by the way, Mr. Chairman, I've been to many Farm Bureau picnics at your grandma and grandpa's.
Well, at this point, we'll listen to Wyoming Game and Fish.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Angie Bruce, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish, and I have two folks with me that'll provide some additional context to me as well. But first of all, I'd like to just start with the chairman's question. We work very well with our tribes. And is a formal agreement needed? From our perspective, probably not. Would we entertain one? Could there be additional benefits that we don't see now? Maybe. But we currently have a long-standing relationship with the tribe. Boy, our reservation in the state has a remarkable fish and wildlife resources. Very fortunate to have that incredible resource there. And we work really closely with them. We don't have a tribal liaison within the department. However, we lean really heavily on our local Lander Regional Field Office right down in Lander, and those folks who are closest to the reservation to develop those relationships and that working ability. And I'll let them give some examples in a minute. First of all, I just want to touch on 3 examples from my perspective that are a little broader in scope. The first one is we were very grateful and excited to help with the feral horse roundup. We used Game and Fish property, a wildlife habitat management area, to corral the horses before they were shipped off. Happy to do that in the past. We'll be happy to do that in the future, I hope, on that as well. Secondly, when we identified and the governor identified mule deer migration corridor known as the Upper Wind River, we shared data with the tribe as well and worked closely on that identification. Those mule deer go in and out of the reservation, on and off private land, public land, and clear into the park as well. So sharing that data was essential and it worked very well. And then my third example is a wildlife crossing project known as the Du Bois Project on Highway 26. We have not secured all the funding for that project yet. It's around $25 million. However, when we went to the tribal councils to introduce the topic, the crossing would not be on tribal land. However, it would benefit the animals that move in and out of the reservation. They weren't only acceptable of us proposing a project for federal money, they were very, very excited about it. So that's another example where we try to work towards a common goal. But first, I'm going to turn it over, Chief of Wildlife, Dan Smith, to add a little more detail, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Dan Smith. I'm the Wildlife Division Chief and Chief Game Warden for the Game and Fish Department, and appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you today. As Angie pointed out, the Wind River Reservation has a wonderful wildlife resource, both on the wildlife side and the fisheries side. And so I'm going to leave the fisheries side to Joe, but on the wildlife side, I wanted to start with our law enforcement. So our game wardens have a great working relationship with tribal fish and game. And we really try to respect the authority of the tribes. And so if it occurs on tribal lands, we try to turn anything over to Art Lawson. We have a great working relationship with him. And so any wildlife violations that we detect that are on tribal lands, we turn that over to the reservation to investigate. And the same works the other way. They've been, Art and his crew have been very good about if something happens off the reservation, then it's turned over to our guys. And I did want to highlight just one case where we all worked together on it. It's a little bit older, but there was a case in 2012 where 4 moose were poached. And it was 2 tribal members that were enrolled, a Native American that wasn't enrolled, and then just a non-tribal member. They accessed land through the reservation to private land that was off the reservation. So there was a complex land status, and then mixed our defender or our suspects were from different inside and outside the reservation. And so we worked together on that, coordinating interviews, locating who people were, and going through all of that. And in the end, we got prosecution on all 4 of those. 3 of them lost their hunting privileges for life. 1 of them lost it for 20 years. So all of them are not hunting anymore. And so that was just a great example of our agency and the tribe working together. And then just on wildlife projects, Angie touched on a few of them already, but just a couple other to highlight there. We've done trumpeter swan reintroductions on the reservation. We've done prairie dog surveys to try to assess our prairie dog populations across the state, and we worked closely with the reservation to do that. We've done peregrine falcon, bald eagle, and golden eagle surveys, both on and off the reservation by both tribal members and our agency. As we've mentioned before, big game animals don't recognize those boundaries, and so they move in and out. And so we share our big game distribution and harvest data back and forth across those lines, and that helps both sides manage wildlife. As you are aware, what we call the project herd, we have the highest chronic wasting disease prevalence in this area. And so we've worked together with the tribes to try to monitor CWD, In our 2025 surveillance, it's still the highest at 61.9%. And so we're trying different management strategies outside of the reservation to try to address that and help it not spread further. We've worked together on hunter education training, and we've worked together on bighorn sheep collaring and monitoring. And then Angie's already mentioned the feral horse roundup. And so then the last thing I wanted to talk on is we have worked closely with both tribes on grizzly bear management. And so Wyoming has set itself up to get grizzly bears delisted. And all of our documents, our tri-state memorandum, our conservation strategy, and our Wyoming state plan include the tribe in all of those things to make sure that when grizzly bears are delisted, that we can share management and make that population work. And so we've done a lot of captures on the reservation in cooperation with the tribes. We've done camera studies. And so there's just, even in the large carnivore species, we've done a lot of work across both agencies.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Joe Dermidi. I'm the Regional Fisheries Supervisor in the Lander region, and I'm here to share, some of my local experience, being in the Lander region. In our department's work with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the tribes. We have through the years, I've been here for 25 years. And over the 25 years, we've been working a lot on conservation and co-management of 3 species that we say are species of greatest conservation need. These species are either in low abundance or reducing or declining population numbers, or the habitat has been fragmented or shrinking. During these years, we provided assistance on the reservation, on the Little Wind, the Wind River, the Poposia drainages, and we provide assistance in the form of equipment because we have electrofishing boats and electrofishing rafts. And often these projects require a lot of personnel to pull off the sampling. So our sampling often will use like 2 electrofishing rafts, and sometimes a chase raft. It'll take upwards of like 6 people at minimum to get the sampling done. So we provide that assistance. And through the years, the type of projects that we've worked on is population monitoring, to where we would get trend data and be able to find whether these populations are declining or increasing and what factors may be affecting them. The other types of work that we do is we look at movement studies to figure out where adults spend their life stages, where the early life stages are. And to give you an example, like sauger, they begin their early life stage in the river, like in the Little Poposia, or in the Poposia drainage, the Little Wind River drainage. They lay their eggs there, they spawn, the fry drift down with high water in the springtime. They get flushed into Boysen Reservoir. In Boysen Reservoir, they are reared as juveniles, and then they grow. And then when they become sexually mature at age 2 for males often, and age 3 for females, then they move back up in the river, and then they spawn again. And there's this life cycle that occurs on and off the reservation. So we work closely with a common goal in mind, is to conserve that sauger and also to conserve burbot and Yellowstone cutthroat trout, to ensure that going into the future that they're protected and they're going to maintain a sound population. The other thing that our agency coordinates closely on is stocking of alpine lakes. And we do this through helicopter stocking. So in the fish division, we have fisheries management people, which I am a fisheries manager, but we also have fish culture people that operate the hatcheries, they grow the fish. Well, when it comes to about in July, our culture section coordinates with the tribes to have a helicopter come, and they land at St. Lawrence, And then our culture section brings trucks, hatchery trucks, and transports the fish and provides the assistance to get the alpine lakes stocked. Often the fish will come from federal hatcheries, but in some instances, like for tiger trout and golden trout, those fish are raised in our state hatcheries, and they're brought and stocked on the reservation. So those are examples where we have a common goal in mind to conserve native fish species, but also to enhance the sport fisheries for the general public and tribal members that like to go up and fish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll stand for any questions.
Is there any questions, Representative Altman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, or everybody. Director Bruce, what is, with the situation with the chronic wasting, is that only in the bighorns? Is that through the male or the deer populations? Are we just going to wait until those affected animals are gone? Or how's it going to come around? Can you give me some information?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, I'm going to try. So in deer species, it's found in most herd units throughout the entire state. So kind of started in the southeast part of the state and has progressively moved north and west throughout the state. And so almost every deer herd now has had at least a detected positive within the herd. Does not mean that it's the same prevalence throughout the entire herd. So it's going to have hot spots throughout the state. Elk seem to do a little better with CWD. Their prevalence isn't as high, but as you've noticed in the news in the last year, we've detected CWD now in elk on our feed grounds in northwest Wyoming. So even in our elk, it has moved through the entire state. Most of the herd units now have CWD, and so right now there is no cure for CWD. It lives in the environment, and it can be passed nose to nose and through the environment, and so we are continuing to work on ways to manage for a prevalence as opposed to, since we don't have a cure yet, someday we hope to have a cure, that would be great. But right now we manage for prevalence. And so in areas where prevalence creeps up, we try to change our harvest strategies to try to push that prevalence back down.
And just for my information, so how does that affect, because the animals go tribal and non-tribal lands. I mean, that's what they do. But has that affected the hunting and the licenses that we're sending or we're issuing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, we have seen some population effects in places, so it would affect licenses. And then as we're trying to push prevalence in different areas, we adjust our license numbers to try to harvest more in certain areas. And so, for example, in our project herd, which is around Riverton and Lander, that prevalence is very high. So we've gone to a general season. We've extended those dates. So we're trying to push the population down in order to try to push prevalence down and then let healthier deer move in. Also, by pushing the population down, we try to keep them from migrating to other areas and spreading that disease. And so we try different management strategies in hopes of keeping the prevalence at a manageable level. Because as you know, CWD is 100% fatal. Deer tend to live about 2 years after they contract it.
I had one question here. I understand that the Wyoming Game and Fish own parcels of land throughout the state. And is there any written policy or any policy that pertains to culture resources? The reason I'm asking because of the Wiggins Fork project, that was something that was found out later with the Buffalo jump excavation, I guess, and the tribes heard about it later. I know there was efforts to rectify that and bring in the tribes after the work already started. because that was done through the college here. And I was just wondering if is there any policy that in terms of those issues that there may be some cultural resources or at least some notification of the tribes once a project starts on the land that's game and fish.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. What we've tried to do is, yes, we tried to notify the tribes as soon as we learn about those cultural resources.
Mhm.
And then we try to set up rules on our WHMAs that protect those cultural resources. So the Buffalo Jumps and the Wiggins Fork is an area that's now protected where we don't want people going in and digging in there. We try to investigate if there's vandalism or digging that's outside of what the university was doing as part of their research. And so, yes, we do try to protect those cultural resources.
Okay. Yeah, I just know that was an issue that was brought up later on, as we all know. But maybe if there was something in writing that might made the transition a little bit smoother. Because some of the old folks on the Shoshone side, they felt we know what's up there. They should just leave it alone, But there's differences of approaches to cultural matters, So I'm glad it worked out. I know that they didn't have a field school up there this year, did they? I know they did last year.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if they did this year or not.
Yeah, I think Todd Gunther was the one that led the charge on that, but I think he didn't. He opted out this summer for health reasons. But I think just those basic notifications and stuff is probably pretty important because, we all have ancestral land throughout the state, whether that's a red desert or Yellowstone or wherever, but up in that area also. And I think just some type of written notification policy would go a long ways.
And
That's
Mr.
just my comment.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's an excellent comment. This committee has helped with, I think, at least 3 bills. I'm looking, maybe Ian, maybe you can help me remember. There was one on archaeological remains. There was one on petroglyphs that eventually came out and was funded. There was one more, and it doesn't just apply to the game and fish, of course. It would apply to WYDOT. It would apply to state lands. It would apply to our state institutions potentially. So there's probably a lot more work that could be done. You're about to lose yourself. And that would be a great idea. That'd be a great project.
Is there any more comments or questions from the committee?
Should we hit Department of Education?
Or we got, and I don't know if we're going to hear from the Wyoming Highway Patrol also. You're welcome to come up and sit in on this discussion. I'll leave it up to Cody.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Nishkoy Kwalea, Chief Policy Officer again, and my colleague, Mr. Black, Tribal Liaison and Social Studies Standard Consultant. So when we reviewed the accord and the information there, a lot of the things in there, the department's already doing. But I'll caveat that as well by saying that we are one education institution in comparison to numerous others, as been mentioned across the state, not just the post-secondary ones, but also, you think about preschools and Head Starts and BOCES. And so there's a lot of other education partners out there that could come along as well. Under Superintendent Degenfelder's leadership, the Native American Education Cabinet was established in 2024. And the intent of that cabinet was really what the intent of the Washington Accord is to have tribal members advise the superintendent on education policies, challenges, opportunities, and have that open forum for both sides to have that discussion. And that's been going extremely well. And we continue to carry that on. Should the accord go forward for Wyoming, we would hope it would codify a lot of the really great work that we've seen within the department, but also to say that, my colleague here to the left, has been the tribal liaison for over 11 years, and that's half of his position. And so like other state agencies, we often face staffing challenges as well. And this is the first year that we have a full-time literacy position. And so thinking about that's also a challenge for us as well, and that we don't represent all entities. But I'll let Mr. Black kind of talk about his experience as tribal liaison and more of the specificity going forward.
Thank you, Chief. I'll just hold on to this. Rob Black, the Wyoming Department of Education's Native American Liaison and Social Studies Specialist. Echoing what Chief Goicolea said, we reach out. We work on that relationship with the tribes. What Mr. Beer said really though echoed for me and resonated for me the respect for tribal sovereignty, active listening, humility, those things. My approach for these 11 years, a lot of it is just keeping those lines of communication open, listening, trying to make connections. Oftentimes someone will approach me with a new idea for education, like, hey, I've got a great idea to go on the reservation schools and implement something. And I listen for a while, but usually I'll stop them fairly early and I'll say, have you talked to the tribes yet? Have you talked to the business councils? And they're like, well, no. Should I? I go, yes. So I usually say, get the tribal business councils on board, get their permission and their blessing, and let them know what you're up to if you're going to come up on the reservation. Granted, we're the public state education agency, and as we've heard, 3 of the 4 reservation schools are public, but I always try to nudge people internally and especially outside the agency with new ideas and new projects to go before the councils, and I offer to augment those or facilitate those meetings as well. Again, in line with some of the other testimony, respecting that government to government relationship. Even though it's not statutory that I do that to respect the tribes and augment that communication. So that's been my approach over the years. One approach.
And Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, per our testimony this morning, we spend the bulk of our time working with the school districts because that's in direct line with our line of duty as well. But we are very much in that system of collaboration and support, not in directive and mode like that. And so I think there's always opportunity to improve relationships and to improve dialogue. And so I'll end with that.
Well, I think listening to the departments that are in front of us today, there is a relationship. There is some are good, some have moved forward over the years. I remember working with DFS when we first contracted the state funding, and we had our ups and downs up through that time, but we worked it out. I think YDOT has a really strong relationship with the tribes. Game and Fish, thanks for helping us round up those feral horses. There was thousands of them, and hopefully those AUMs will be there for a little bit longer for wildlife and our cattle, I guess. And the Department of Education has been in the forefront on some of the education issues, which are always, it's a dynamic process with education. There's always something come around a corner up there, but I think but I don't know if there's anything formal between the agencies and the tribes. I don't know, there's probably MOUs on specific projects that happen over time, and but there's nothing long-term that's in place that I know of.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the relationship with DFS is possibly more formalized. YDOT would have formal agreements about a lot of aspects of transportation corridors and transportation work and maintenance. I don't know about the other agencies necessarily. I do think that one piece to this is all state agencies saying how they work with the tribes. It'd be interesting what tribal government says, how they work with you, and we could listen to that. I mean, two sides of the same coin. We'll get that today, I hope. Ms. Neely, am I kind of right on that? Yours is pretty formalized.
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I apologize. I didn't introduce myself again because I was on earlier this morning. I'm Jennifer Neely with the Wyoming Department of Family Services. I serve as a district manager and also as the agency's tribal liaison. Our social services programs are they're very tuned in for the contracts that we provide so that the tribal offices can serve children and families living on and off of the reservation. Our economic assistance and security programs, I think Ms. Livers is still on the phone. Those, we do have some service provisions in place through an office that exists on Fort Washakie, or in Fort Washakie, excuse me. We have the Fort Washakie office, and then we also serve tribal members in our Lander and Riverton offices. We make those available. Those are contract services, but those are probably not as spelled out as our social services contracts are.
Mr. Chairman, we have, as Chairman Case said, we have a number of formal agreements with the reservation. We often add work onto our projects and in an ARS type agreement, authority to render services, and then the tribal councils will pay their share. We have done a number of those things. Since I've been here, we have over 100 projects, and there almost always is an ARS agreement attached to something on the reservation so that something else can be improved, like a pathway, lighting, those type of things. And we're very open to that, not only with tribal governments, but also local governments.
Thank you, Mr. Beers. And I think from what I'm hearing from the Game and Fish, it's kind of like a project to project type of thing. There's nothing in terms of a base plate of how to go about things. So we're not consistent across our departments. And the accord that we're talking about, that's just kind of to start the discussion. Maybe we don't work towards an accord. Maybe we work towards documents for each department or agency of how, I'm sounding like some are ahead of others. I mean, like you were saying, Cody, and in terms of the respect factor and the sovereignty, there's projects that are going on currently that could build upon, obviously. But maybe maybe it's not an accord. Maybe it's there has to be something more in writing, because I know the Game and Fish does a lot of work with, with Art and his crew, and but there's nothing formal, So I think we're talking about the culture resource aspect of that also, and that's just a lesson we all learn from. But I think some of that we could build on, and like I said, an accord is going to be a big document. Maybe we don't need that, but I truly feel we need something in terms of how agencies and how obviously the tribes need to be involved. The tribes with their respective agencies that work with whatever program they're dealt to deal with. But I think it's probably it'll just lead to better understanding, better working relations, and we sometimes we won't stub our toe as much, in terms of how we approach things. Chairman's Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm listening and I'm open-minded about it, but I think the relationship that we see here with all these agencies is different in the context of, and I'm not really thinking that there's one approach that would work and be uniform across them all. For example, the Department of Education, these are state-covered school districts. They're otherwise covered by the law. They're covered by all the requirements in law and taxation and funding. Whereas our contractual arrangements, we're implementing federal requirements in many instances, and that has some implications and on. We have transportation goals that are mutual. We have standards we have to build to. We want, and so that is a bit more formalized. The Wyoming Game and Fish, I see that as a relationship that's by necessity, where because of the transitory nature of the resources, you don't manage herds that go across borders. So they have bonded themselves together, not because there's been a requirement, but because it's best for the resource. I mean, it's really clear to me, and that they've advanced, both agencies, tribal agency and the state, have advanced policies here in protecting the resource, very successfully so. And so they haven't really needed a direction to do that because their mission is to protect the resource in both places. So I'm open-minded, but I'm like, well, it depends on the relationship, which is complicated and different in each aspect. And so when we say each agency shall do this and each agency shall do that, that's where I get a little nervous. But I'm with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any comments from the committee? Any other comments from the panel here? I know one important aspect maybe is oversight on our side, but the Department of Health, which is our biggest, our biggest agency in the state. I'm not too sure if they have anything in place. Are you aware?
Well, they certainly have a lot of programs, a lot of funding for, and there are things this committee did, including expanding tribal Medicaid. We did that a few years ago. There is the Department of Health would have Medicaid payments and Medicaid eligibility there is a relationship. Maybe we should have them come to our next meeting. We could pick up some other agencies.
Mr. Beers.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that has happened within WYDOT is we have worked with the tribes through the years, and we haven't done it in probably 10 years, but we did do a series of trainings with our people out here on the ground, because we get people who move to Fremont County and the reservation area from all over the country. And so we've used people like you in the past, Mr. Chairman, Patrick Goggles, other members of the tribes to how to work in Native American country, that type of training. And I think it's benefited WYDOT employees through time to at least help to understand a little bit about the culture and the differences.
Thank you, Mr. Beers. But I guess obviously, as the lady from Fish and Game mentioned, there's always room for improvement in any area. But I think there's already been a foundation laid through, like you said, MOUs or whatever. But maybe the process is to work collaboratively between how we deal with each other. This is my first term as a legislator, but I'm still kind of I shouldn't say in awe, but surprised at how little Cheyenne knows about us as tribal people. And that's not a slam against anybody, but I just think Cheyenne is far removed from us, and sometimes that lends towards that discussion. But I don't know how many questions I've had just over lunch from fellow legislators or lobbyists about tribal issues. And I think that's still out there. That's why I brought this forward. I'm not too sure. Like I said, and I'm like Hale, or Chairman Case. I'm I'm open-minded about the process. Maybe it's not an accord. Maybe it's not really a formal policy, but maybe it's something that helps us to understand each other better. Because I think that's probably a two-way street sometimes. You know, that we got to learn the state system a little bit better too. Um, but I think it's a discussion that's open now, and if we decide to move forward or we don't, um, I wanted to at least bring that discussion forward and see how things are working with certain agencies and with the tribes, plural. Is there any other discussion? Is there any other comments from the councils regarding this issue? I guess I will leave it up for discussion with the committee here in terms of what their thoughts. I mean, go forward, stay same, kind of let each agency deal with the tribes in terms of working relationships as is, or do we want to enhance and improve the discussion? Representative Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank all of you for being here. And it seems this is my first term on this committee, but it seems as though and I've heard it mentioned quite a few times as collaboration. I would suggest maybe sometimes it's cross-training or amongst the different ones instead of saying, well, this is our funding, and if we start working with you, maybe we won't need these two different. But I think a lot of times it helps in efficiency, it helps in direction, it helps in collaboration because entities are more friendly towards one another. And I know a few years back, I went down to the YDOT office because I was like, why are these roads closed? What goes on here? Why do they need more funding? Blah, blah, blah. And Mr. Beers was very good about showing me the chart on the wall and how they are years in advance of their planning and how they're going to handle different roads and how that works with the people and the equipment, the plans, the weather, and all of those things. And so I did go to one tribal whiteout meeting, and there was a little bit of dissension there, but a few conversations were going on. So I thought that was real good. And I'm glad you brought this up because it helps me to understand all of the different entities, how they work together, how they don't work together, and just a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we never see. So thank you to everybody.
Young lady in the front.
Well, yeah, we're not there yet. I was going to ask if I see both the chairman are back. Do you guys have any closing remarks on this issue? Chairman Case.
Mr. Chairman, in the agenda, we have public comment on this issue, and then we have committee directives and then general public comment. So I'm not sure what public comments we're going to go into, but I would like to discuss the possibility of one committee directive. And it's not on this topic. It was actually on the topic before lunch. And I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but that was the issue of minors accessing alcohol. And I did look at that statute over the lunch hour. Really, if you're a family member, you can buy as much alcohol for that person and as possible. And I just am wondering if we might want to have a bill draft that would reconsider that. And what I had sort of proposed was that the statute right now, Ian, you might help me because you have it handier than I do, I think. Yeah, it says that it's illegal for a person to provide alcohol to a person under 21 years of age unless, and it's got, the person is the ward of the person. There's a medical reason, which I'm having a lot of trouble finding, or you're an immediate family member. Do I have that right? Those three circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, that's right.
And I don't understand the concept of the ward. I think anyone that is the guardian of a person that's underage should not be providing alcohol. And I propose we get rid of the ward. There is no medical reason that I think any that is relevant. I mean, that would be in a clinical situation, and maybe that was trying to catch medicines that have alcohol in it or something, but that's ridiculous. And we wouldn't regulate that if it was under a doctor's care or practitioner's care. That's fine. But the family member, immediate family member, was such a broad thing. I was wondering if we might limit that to just being parents. Parents can provide alcohol to their children. You know, some people do it as a part of a religious ceremony. Some people do it as a part of a cultural tradition. I'm not condemning it or condoning it. I'm just saying we probably ought to allow that exception in the law. But I was thinking that if that exception were in the law, you shouldn't have the ability to intoxify your children. And so I thought, well, a father shouldn't be allowed to get his 13-year-old son drunk. I just don't think it's right. And so I was thinking of limiting that to the legal standard of 0.008. And so is there any thought that we might at least have a bill drafted to look at that? I mean, after hearing that alcohol, there were 50-some alcohol violations, the intoxication rate average is like 0.143 blood alcohol, and there was only one citation issued to someone providing the alcohol out of all the 50-plus situations is appalling to me. And to think that people continually get drunk, intoxicated at gatherings where alcohol is provided by families on and off the reservation, this is, you know, it's everywhere, is appalling to me. So I was hoping I could encourage the committee to maybe take a look at a bill draft.
Well, I'll allow that, co-chairman. You need to make a motion?
Well, that's the motion, and I would search for a second. You know.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Second. Any questions or comments?
So we would just be looking at a draft.
Draft.
Mr. Chairman, it's not a final vote on a bill or anything. We haven't seen the bill. It would be drafted and be available for public comment. And we would have it posted for at least 2 weeks before our next meeting.
Yes.
So it's something to think about. Where would the objections come? Maybe for religious reasons from some, I don't know. But Ian, is that a doable bill draft?
Mr. Chairman, certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no more comments.
No
more comments.
Senator Barlow.
Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to weigh in and the ability to participate remotely. So I just want to be clear, we're talking about, this is not a bill that just affects all of Wyoming law. This is not just about the reservation. So, and our tribal citizens. So, Mr. Chairman, case, this often goes to Corporations Committee when we have these broad alcohol-related bills. So I just throw that out there. Not that I'm afraid of taking this up, but it would certainly go to the Corporations Committee in the legislature because that's where these type of bills go. So I just throw that out there that while this committee may be the one taking up the bill, proposing a bill draft, we'll get a lot of interest from folks who usually attend your committee meeting, Mr. Chairman Case. Thank you, Chairman Posey.
And Chairman Posey, Senator Barlow, thank you for that. My guess is this is in more the judiciary field. It's right in their bailiwick. And I would suggest that our best way to proceed would be if we were to introduce a bill that we would hope that it goes to, that we would encourage it to go to judiciary and let them take a look at the bill. We're in Fremont County, and it does affect on and off the reservation here in Fremont County. There's certainly a reservation component, and we're trying to address juvenile access to alcohol here. And this is something we could do that potentially could help. But I concur that it should go to another committee. I don't think it's corporations as much as judiciary, my good colleague. And I would encourage it to go there. Should we pass it out of this committee?
Okay, I'm going to call for the question. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye. It's just for a draft.
Those opposed saying,
Get it, make your comment. Yeah.
oh, question, Representative Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, with this bill draft, are we looking at identifying the people that can or cannot or should not or would be in trouble? Or the 0.08, or exactly what are the details that we're looking at?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would look like this. If a minor were found to be intoxicated, and they'd find that there would be a reason now to find out how the minor got the liquor. And if it wasn't from the parents, then it would be potentially a misdemeanor charge of $750. If it was from the parents, it would, and the minor would have to have a alcohol level higher than the legal limit to drive, basically 0.008. So if parents provided a glass of wine and they were being responsible with their children, and they didn't let them go drive, or they didn't let them go out, that would presumably not be a problem. But if a child ended up being intoxicated, it would be a problem. So does that help? Thank you.
And just for information, I know, and Miss Dresser might realize, on the reservation, it's 0.005.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you can't take your little brother out, throw a big party. You know, I mean, that you just can't do that. Just, you don't come under the family exception anymore. He's got another question.
Representative Baumann.
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Chairman. What does the tribal government think about that? Since we're here, does that sound like that's a reasonable draft for discussion?
Chairman, so I guess, our laws are different than the state laws. We do have under our law and order code furnishing alcohol to minors. And then we also have another code or another section, what is it?
Yeah, there's
Other acts prohibited against children. So currently we do find individuals that if we know are contributing to minors, we do have it in our SALOC, a couple of charges.
So in other words, you're more strict than the state with respect to this aspect,
Correct.
Yes.
you know? So this, it's kind of appropriate in the sense that we're dealing with the law we deal with, you deal with the law you deal with, but it would match up better to have this, you know, not look the other way when a family member is involved in the contributing situation.
Mr. Chairman, also, I worked in the prosecutor's office for 17 years, and also the juvenile will be charged. You know, it's a case by case basis. If they break up all these juveniles somewhere, the officer can charge them because they're under the age, and but then, like, Chairwoman Jester said, ours is 0.005. Where compared to the state is a little bit higher, you're 0.008. So that falls under our DUI. So with the adults and with the adult offenders, if there is a minor involved or a juvenile that's under the influence, if it's either by alcohol or drug. But then that's a case by case of how that officer is investigating that case. So, right now, I know the tribes we really hurt is for a juvenile detention center. This should have been a building already constructed up and done, because that's our biggest problem is the juvenile. We have a place for the adults, but not for the juveniles. So it makes it, like it does, it makes it hard for the officer, the on-call social worker that gets called, whether the parents are being arrested. So then they're looking for the foster care placement. And like I've heard earlier, we do have people don't want to be foster care parents. And that's our biggest problem too, you know, and then it's sad when your own tribal family will not take in one of their own people because they might have already too many mouths to feed. 12, 10, 15 people under that one household, then to take in 2 or 3 at 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And you know, it's very hard. And I know the tribes, we did recently, the council, both councils, we did initiate a state of emergency on our youth. We did have a letter drafted to our region, the Billings area office, proclaiming that. I and Chairman Grossbeck have signed that letter, and that has went up to the Billings area office. And I can't remember the new one. They got a new interim director again, so it went to that person, and then one before that, and the one before that. So in all reality, and then like I voiced in Wind River and Tribal, we need to go up as a delegation, you know, to the region. This is what we want. We need a juvenile facility. And then extending them 6 hours. They don't use that place no more in Busby, Montana. Or was that one locally was down here in
Sweetwater.
Sweetwater, more closer for the officer, or, you know, to take that juvenile that's intoxicated. So we have issues with our juveniles, and they're a lot different breed now. They're a lot different than when I was, in my day, we still got whipped, you know, but see, our juveniles are smart. You touch me, you're gonna go to jail. You're gonna get charged for child abuse. So they know how to play that card. So they're very street smart. So, but we're really, that's one thing, that's another thing. We need a juvenile facility. And I pray it becomes a reality real soon, but it's just sending these kids to another facility, but I guess that's just how the card plays out.
Chairman,
Chairman Grossbeck.
so our SALOC, regardless, if you're a parent, guardian, minor's with you, you're intoxicated, the minor's intoxicated, you're still gonna get charged with contributing, regardless, you know, whatever scenario is, it is, so.
Representative Altman.
I just want to say, this is just a comment. Thank you for bringing the idea of a bill draft, and thank you all for your conversation, because one of my things for the last 3 years has been juvenile justice, and I can't get any support. One of the city councils in Riverton actually said, you know what, we're not handling it. That's responsibility of the state. Well, we all have different counties, different communities. So the collaboration ideas that I hear today, and also to see that you all know that it is a need, and that we should work together. It shouldn't just be their responsibility or their responsibility, but our responsibility. Because it's in this area, my belief is it's going to take all of us to build it, to staff it, to support it, and to get the children, the young people, the help that they need. So thank you.
Chairman. So it isn't just the Wind River Reservation thing, it's a state thing. It's you know, where alcohol, we don't serve alcohol on the reservation. We have to come to town to get it, you know, and I think a lot of kids I just ask anybody in town to buy them for them. I know this for a fact because my niece bought alcohol in Lander at Mr. D's, and then coming out of town, she wrecked on Tweed Lane and passed away, and she was 16 years old, you know, and I have a nephew who was working on rigs over by Wright, and he went to an establishment there, a restaurant that served alcohol, and the waitress didn't even ask him for an ID, and he wasn't 21. But she served him alcohol, and when he left, he got in an accident and wrecked too and passed away. So it is a whole state thing. It isn't just a Wind River Reservation thing. It's happening everywhere in the state. So, yeah.
So all of us.
Yep.
I know as Chairman Large mentioned, and Chairman Grossback, is the issue with juvenile justice. And I know this is a part of how we could approach as Chairman Case brought forward. But I know we had the listening session last fall with the superintendents down here in Riverton. And that was another issue that, you know, some younger people, unfortunately, have no control. There's no control over them. They could go into schools and raise heck, and there's no consequences. I mean, and that's unfortunate. And I think we looked at some of these issues years ago, but it was almost a pipeline to incarceration at that next level, a prison, you know, that there's no consequences, and they ended up federal somewhere or state somewhere. So I think that continues, as Representative Altman says, that's continues to still be a big issue yet, and how we approach it, you know.
Chairman. So right now we are updating our law and order code, and that is a section where we will be a little bit more stricter with the contributing to minors and the other acts prohibited against children for adults. And then also for the minors who are, MIP is what they call it, minor under the influence. But yeah, so that is an area that we're looking at to get more stricter with.
And Mr. Chairman, going along with what Councilwoman Dresser had said, our law and order code is like 34 years old. It needs more teeth. And it was a different time era when that was put together by Honorable Chief Judge John St. Clair at the time. So it's very outdated. So even when I got on the council, it was already moving to getting that CLOC updated, and the attorney that's helping us get that done, we're still having those when we have our joint meeting, when our executive secretary for joint gets it set up, when we just deal with CLOC for about 3 hours. So but it's just, you know, we got so many irons in the fire. So let this meeting down, go to this meeting, go to this meeting. And, you know, it's just, we're all over the place. And then we have to feed off each other. Now, what did we just, you know, do you remember this? Do you remember? But yeah, it's a work in progress. So we're, like she said, we're getting it done. We're getting it done, so it's gonna have more teeth to it, so just to let you know, Mr. Chairman.
That's good to hear. Now, do we have to revote or did we already vote on this?
Well, let's go ahead. I would recommend we just revote it because I think Representative Ottman was trying to get our attention. So, it just, if that's all right with you, it would be all those in favor of having a bill drafted to look at.
You heard the motion made by Chairman Case. Is there a second? Second by Representative Gugemont. Is there any questions or comments? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye to the bill.
Aye. Those opposed, same. Motion passes.
Looks like it was unanimous.
Thank you. Now we are going to take public comment.
Here she comes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Diana Tillman Mitchell, and I have been commenting on these meetings because I feel I've been activist on the reservation for almost 50 years. And I also am the coordinator for the Eastern Shoshone Treaty resolution to the Eastern Shoshone General Council. And I'm commenting on the topics education. In the Treaty of the 1868, Article 10, the United States hereby agrees to furnish annually to the Shoshone the physician and the teacher, and it goes on, the carpenter, the mill, and all this business, okay? The reservation could be sustainable and on its own if they would just go with their treaty, have a business plan related to that. And then during the 250th anniversary of America, which is going on at this time, this would be included in the education that could be provided to the communities of off the reservation and on the reservation, but not just Jackson, but in places like Riverton, Lander, Shoshone, Thermopolis, and we go statewide on the history of the Eastern Shoshone tribe, early 1700s to present, a program going statewide, because I'm reading currently the Chief Washakie military correspondence from 1851 to when Chief Washakie died. And that's what happened. And I believe that that's what we need to do, is educate the people, the public, the community on our history. Because I heard earlier this morning that people don't know, you know, that they're not even teaching it in the schools. And you know, the Shoshone has a real rich history, okay? We have two treaties, 1863, which encompassed 5 states, and there's where that military correspondence brings in that history on what happened and how the Shoshones, actually Shoshones rule all the way down to Utah, Uinta. And so, not to say that we rule, but you know, we had that jurisdiction. And we do today, we just don't enforce it. And then the Shoshone people have always had treaty rights health care, okay? I've had health care since I was a child. When I was born, my mom had health care because our elders helped my mom. She wasn't even Indian, but she was a tribal member through marriage. That is when we had good health care through the Indian Health Care Service. Now, I believe that Contract 638 could only be used for referrals and special health needs because it only goes 1 to 3 years, whereas our treaty goes forever. We can't deny that. It goes forever. That's an obligation that the United States promised to the Shoshone tribe that they got to uphold. Then also I would like to suggest that, you know, our historic preservation and cultural resources, we could, if we only had a plan. I've been harping on a plan for the reservation for years. Because I know when I was archivist, I found that the Shoshone Business Council had a business plan, 25 years business plan. And that's what we need. We could use our treaty to do that. But I think we could do it like the historic preservation. We could have a plan where the preservation has contact with the highway patrol, the transportation, all this. And when there is a project that's going to go on, then they automatically hire a tribal consultant. And that would provide jobs. You could use that oil and gas money to fund those people. Chuck Rear had something like that going back in the 70s. And he used oil and gas, but it didn't expand. It wasn't sophisticated, the historic preservation. There's where we need to go further and expand, where we have an MOU with the state, where we have tribal members working with the construction. If there's a construction or an oil or a gas line or something, then the tribe's contacted and the person gets a job. Because we want economic development on our reservation. And I would like to also mention about our contract 638, okay? There must be accountability and financially audit reports given to the Eastern Shoshone General Council. We have not had any financial reports for at least 10 years, audits. And there is discrepancies. There's no reports, no communication. And then we don't even know the laws that we live under. When John St. Clair wrote that law and order code, he was supposed to bring it back to General Council. He only brought back 3 ordinances. What about all the other ones? The people don't even know what laws they live under. So you got to make sure that whatever bills that you write, that you let the people know. Because on this reservation, we don't know the laws that we're living under. That's what is wrong right now with our general council, well, with our council right now. No communication, no financial accountability, nothing. Don't even honor general council. Anyway, I'm going to give you a copy of my letter. I'll give you another copy of my next comments for tomorrow, and a copy of our treaty.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Is there any more public comment? Well, looks like we'll wrap up a little early today. I'd like to thank Ms. Collins for her presentation this afternoon, and we'll see how we approach it at a later time. And I guess we'll start tomorrow morning with healthcare at 9:15, but we'll have roll call at 9 a.m. Chairman Hayes.
And we don't have a cultural event. We hope to have one, but we didn't get that done. So y'all enjoy your time. Lander's only 24 miles away if you want to go over there.
Have a good evening, and thank you folks for your presentation this afternoon.